Find her. The words tore through the silence before anyone in the room could understand what had happened. For 5 years, Alpha King Lucian Blackwood had not opened his eyes. For 5 years, the ruler of the most powerful wolf kingdom in the Northern Territories had remained motionless inside a chamber guarded day and night. He had breathed. His heart had beaten, but he had never awakened. Healers came from every corner of the continent. Scholars carried ancient books into the palace. Priestesses prayed beneath moonlit altars. None of them could reach him. None of them could explain why the strongest alpha in history had fallen into an endless sleep. Yet on a cold autumn night, everything changed. The royal chamber overlooked the dark forests surrounding Blackwood Castle. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows, while silver moonlight slipped through the clouds. 12 guards stood watch beside the king's bed as they had every night for years. The room smelled of cedar wood, old parchment, and fading hope. Then the impossible happened. Lucian's fingers twitched. One guard froze. Another dropped the report he had been reading. The movement was so small that they almost convinced themselves they had imagined it. But then it happened again. A slow curl of his hand. A sharp inhale. The room seemed to hold its breath. The king's chest rose higher than it had in years. His jaw tightened. Beneath closed eyelids, his eyes moved rapidly as if chasing something through a distant dream. "Did you see that?" one guard whispered. Nobody answered. Nobody dared. Suddenly Lucian sat upright. The movement was so sudden that several guards stumbled backward in shock. His silver eyes opened instantly. Clear. Focused. Awake. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They simply stared at the king they thought they might never see again. Lucian's gaze swept across the chamber. Confusion flickered in his eyes, followed by urgency. His breathing deepened. His wolf, silent for half a decade, stirred beneath the surface. The air itself seemed heavier around him. "Your Majesty," the captain finally said, his voice trembling with relief. "You've awakened." But Lucian barely heard him. Something else had captured his attention. A scent. Faint. Impossible. It wasn't inside the room. It wasn't even inside the castle. Yet somehow he could sense it. A delicate trace carried through memory, instinct, and something far older than either. Warm sunlight. Wildflowers after rain. A soul he somehow recognized. His pulse quickened. The feeling struck him with such force that he gripped the edge of the bed. For 5 years, he had wandered through darkness. For 5 years, he had dreamed of a girl whose face vanished whenever he tried to remember it. Yet now, for the first time, the feeling was real. Close. Alive. Lucian looked toward the rain-covered window. Beyond the mountains. Beyond the forests. Somewhere out there, she existed. The king rose to his feet. Every guard in the chamber stared in disbelief. Then Lucian spoke again, his voice low and absolute. "Find her." And somewhere far beyond the borders of Blackwood Kingdom, a rejected Omega named Evelyn Hart had no idea that the most powerful alpha in the world had just awakened because of her. The first sign that something was wrong came with the silence. Evelyn Hart had spent most of her life learning how to ignore whispers. She had learned how to keep her eyes down when other wolves laughed. She had learned how to smile politely when people spoke about her as if she were invisible. But silence was different. Silence meant people had already made up their minds. The gathering hall of Silver Ridge Pack glowed beneath dozens of lanterns hanging from heavy wooden beams. Families filled every bench. Young wolves stood proudly beside their parents, waiting for the annual pairing ceremony to begin. Evelyn remained near the back wall, her hands folded tightly in front of her simple blue dress. She already knew she did not belong there. At 22 years old, she had become a familiar disappointment. Too quiet, too ordinary, too easy to overlook. The pack elders had never said those words directly, but she had heard them often enough in other forms. Across the room, Nathan Cole stood beside the Alpha's council. Tall, confident, admired by nearly everyone in Silver Ridge. Once, Evelyn had believed fate had connected them. Once, she had spent months hoping he would see something in her worth choosing. Tonight destroyed that hope. The elder called their names. A hush settled over the room. Nathan stepped forward without hesitation. His expression remained calm, almost detached, as though discussing weather instead of someone's future. Evelyn felt every eye turned toward her. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. Then came the words that changed everything. Not cruel, not angry, simply final. Nathan publicly declined the bond everyone had expected him to accept. A murmur swept through the hall. Some wolves looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved. A few smiled. Evelyn stood perfectly still. The disappointment hurt less than the realization that nobody seemed surprised. The ceremony continued moments later. Conversations resumed. Laughter returned. Life moved forward without her. That hurt more than anything. By the time the gathering ended, the moon hung high above the pine-covered mountains surrounding Silver Ridge territory. Evelyn walked alone along a narrow forest trail illuminated by pale silver light. Cold autumn air brushed against her cheeks. Leaves drifted across the path beneath her boots. For the first time in years, she had no idea where she belonged. The pack house no longer felt like home. The wolves she had grown up beside suddenly felt like strangers. She stopped near a small stream winding through the forest. Water reflected the moon like liquid glass. Her chest tightened. She drew a slow breath and stared at her reflection. Tired blue eyes stared back. Nothing about her seemed extraordinary. Nothing that should matter to kings or prophecies or destiny. Yet a strange feeling lingered beneath her sadness. Something she could not explain. The night felt different somehow. The forest seemed unusually still. Even the wind appeared to be listening. Then a sudden warmth spread through the air around her. Not dangerous. Not painful. Just unfamiliar. Evelyn looked up. Far above the trees, clouds slowly drifted away from the moon. Silver light poured across the forest floor. For a brief moment, she felt as though someone far away had spoken her name. She turned quickly. Nobody stood behind her. Only shadows and ancient pines. Yet the feeling remained. Somewhere beyond the horizon, something had changed. And for reasons she could not understand, Evelyn no longer felt entirely alone. Lucian Blackwood had faced wars, rebellions, and storms that swallowed entire valleys. Yet nothing unsettled him like the feeling now growing inside his chest. Dawn had barely touched the towers of Blackwood Castle when he stood before the massive window overlooking the kingdom. Below, servants hurried through courtyards while royal guards rushed between buildings carrying orders. News of the king's awakening had already spread beyond the castle walls. Bells rang from distant villages. Fires burned in celebration across the countryside. Yet Lucian paid attention to none of it. His focus remained fixed on the strange presence lingering at the edge of his senses. Somewhere far away, a single soul seemed connected to him by an invisible thread. Behind him, the doors opened. Lord Harrington, his oldest advisor, entered cautiously. The gray-haired councilman had spent 5 years helping govern the kingdom during Lucian's absence. Relief filled his tired eyes. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "the council has assembled. They are waiting." Lucian remained silent for several moments. Then he turned. "How far does Silver Ridge Pack sit from our northern border?" Surprise flashed across Harrington's face. "Approximately 180 miles. Lucian's gaze sharpened. "And what happened there last night?" The advisor frowned. "I am not aware of anything significant." The answer did not satisfy him. Something had happened. He could feel it. Not through reports or spies. Through instinct. Through something older than logic. During the years trapped inside darkness, Lucian had experienced countless dreams. Most had faded the moment he awakened. But one memory refused to disappear. A girl standing beneath moonlight beside a stream. Golden hair moving gently in the wind. Sadness hidden behind brave eyes. He had never seen her face clearly. Yet every time the dream appeared, the darkness surrounding him weakened. Every time she spoke, he felt less alone. At first he believed she was only a creation of his mind. Now he was no longer certain. A sudden warmth brushed against his senses again. Faint but unmistakable. Lucian closed his eyes. The feeling lasted only seconds before fading. Yet it was enough. Somewhere beyond mountains and forests, she was real. "Prepare my horse," he said. Harrington blinked. "Your Majesty, the physicians have recommended several weeks of recovery." Lucian looked at him calmly. "I have already lost 5 years." The advisor wisely said nothing more. As Harrington left to obey the order, Lucian returned his attention to the horizon. Meanwhile, nearly 200 miles away, Evelyn sat beside the same stream where she had spent the night. Morning sunlight filtered through pine branches overhead. She should have felt miserable after everything that happened. Instead, an unfamiliar energy stirred inside her. Not happiness, not confidence, something stranger. Hope. The sensation made no sense. Nothing in her life had improved. She still had no place to go, no future waiting for her. Yet the crushing loneliness she had carried for years felt lighter somehow. As she rose from the stream bank, a small silver feather drifted from the sky and landed near her feet. Evelyn stared at it. No birds flew overhead. No breeze stirred the trees. Slowly she picked it up. For reasons she could not explain, her heart began to race. Far away, the Alpha King stepped out of Blackwood Castle for the first time in 5 years. And for the first time, destiny began moving toward both of them at the same time. By noon, rumors had already begun moving faster than the wind. Traders crossing mountain roads spoke of strange things happening throughout the northern territories. Wolves who had never met each other reported the same unsettling sensation. A sudden awareness. A distant call they could not explain. In villages scattered hundreds of miles apart, conversations paused for no reason. Hunters stopped in the middle of forest trails and glanced toward the horizon. Elders studied ancient records long forgotten in dusty archives. Something was changing. Nobody understood what it was. Evelyn Hart knew nothing about the growing whispers. She spent the afternoon following an old logging path deeper into the wilderness beyond Silver Ridge territory. The farther she walked, the quieter the world became. Sunlight filtered through towering pines. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her boots. She should have been planning where to go next, but her thoughts kept returning to the strange silver feather resting inside her coat pocket. Every time she touched it, a calm warmth spread through her chest. It felt familiar, as though she had carried it her entire life. Yet she had never seen anything like it before. As evening approached, the sensation returned. The same unusual energy she had felt the night before drifted through her again. It was not painful. It was not frightening. But it was impossible to ignore. The air around her seemed brighter somehow. Colors appeared sharper. Every sound carried farther through the forest. She could hear a stream nearly half a mile away. She could smell rain long before clouds appeared. It felt as though her senses were awakening alongside something hidden deep within her soul. Evelyn sat beside a fallen cedar log and pressed a hand against her chest. Her heartbeat had quickened, not from fear, from anticipation, as though part of her was waiting for something important to happen. Somewhere far away, inside the royal archives of Blackwood Castle, an elderly historian hurried through rows of ancient books. Lord Harrington had ordered every record connected to prophecies, forgotten bloodlines, and moonborn gifts brought before the council. Most were meaningless legends. One was not. The old historian carefully opened a weathered manuscript more than 400 years old. His eyes widened as he read a passage written in faded silver ink. According to the text, there had once existed a rare line of wolves known as moonbound omegas. Their presence was said to awaken dormant gifts, restore fading bonds, and alter the course of kingdoms. The bloodline had supposedly vanished centuries ago, yet one sentence caught his attention more than any other. When the sleeping king rises, the moon-marked daughter shall unknowingly call to every crown that seeks power. The historian immediately carried the book toward the council chamber. At that same moment, deep within the forest, Evelyn looked up as dozens of birds suddenly lifted from the trees and spiraled into the darkening sky. The sight stole her breath. She had never seen anything like it. Then a cold breeze swept through the woods. For the first time, she no longer felt as though she was walking alone. Somewhere beyond the mountains, someone was searching for her, and every passing hour seemed to bring that person closer. The storm arrived just after sunset. Dark clouds rolled across the mountains and swallowed the last traces of daylight, turning the forest into a world of shadows and silver rain. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter and hurried along a narrow trail she barely recognized. She had walked for nearly 2 days without a destination, guided only by instinct and the strange feeling that something was waiting ahead. The rain soon soaked through her sleeves. Cold droplets clung to her hair and ran down her cheeks. Yet despite the weather, she could not shake the sensation growing stronger inside her. It felt like standing near a doorway she could not see. Somewhere beyond it, a new life waited. Meanwhile, the roads leading out of Blackwood Kingdom were alive with movement. Royal riders carried messages across the territories. Scouts searched villages, forests, and mountain settlements. None of them understood exactly who they were looking for. They only knew their king had given a single order: find her. Lucian rode at the front of the largest search party. His black horse moved effortlessly across muddy roads as thunder echoed overhead. 5 years of sleep should have left him weak. Instead, every mile seemed to restore something inside him. The closer he moved toward the northern territories, the stronger the invisible connection became. Several times, he found himself turning toward a direction before any scout reported signs of nearby settlements. It was as if some hidden force was guiding him. Lord Harrington rode beside him beneath a heavy cloak. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "the council fears others may have learned about the prophecy." Lucian's expression remained calm. "They already have." The advisor frowned. "Then we should move faster." Lucian looked toward the distant mountains. "We will." Back in the forest, Evelyn finally spotted an abandoned ranger cabin tucked between towering pines. Relief flooded through her. The small structure looked weathered but intact. She hurried toward it as rain intensified overhead. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and old stone. A small fireplace sat in one corner. Dust covered the floor, but the roof still held. For the first time in days, she felt safe. She settled beside the cold fireplace and removed the silver feather from her pocket. Even in the darkness, it seemed to glow faintly. The sight filled her with the same strange comfort she had felt since finding it. Outside, the storm continued. Wind rattled branches against the cabin walls. Evelyn closed her eyes and listened to the rain. Then she heard something else. Hoofbeats. Very distant. Barely audible beneath the storm. Her eyes opened immediately. The sound disappeared as quickly as it had come. Perhaps it had only been her imagination. Yet her heart had already begun racing. Hundreds of miles away, the connection between two lives had finally begun pulling them toward the same point on the map. Neither knew exactly where the journey would end. But as Lucian lifted his face toward the rain and Evelyn stared into the darkness beyond the cabin window, both felt the same certainty. The distance separating them was growing smaller with every passing hour. The storm finally faded sometime before dawn. Evelyn woke to a silence so complete that it felt unfamiliar after hours of wind and rain. Pale morning light slipped through the cabin window, painting soft gold across the wooden floor. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then reality returned. The empty forest. The uncertain future. The road that still stretched endlessly ahead. She sat up slowly and reached for the silver feather resting beside her. The instant her fingers touched it, warmth spread through her palm. Not imagined. Not remembered. Real. Evelyn frowned. The sensation was stronger than ever before. Almost like a heartbeat. She rose and stepped outside. Mist drifted between towering pines while droplets of rain sparkled on every branch. The world seemed suspended between dream and reality. Then she felt it again. Someone was close. Her breath caught. The feeling arrived suddenly and completely, as though an invisible thread had tightened between two distant points. Every instinct told her she was no longer alone. Across a narrow valley less than half a mile away, Lucian Blackwood brought his horse to a stop. His scouts had spread out hours earlier, searching nearby trails. Yet he barely noticed their reports anymore. The pull guiding him had become impossible to ignore. Stronger than maps. Stronger than reason. For the first time since awakening, he knew with absolute certainty that she was near. The air felt different. Every breath carried traces of the presence he had sensed for days. His silver eyes scanned the forest. Then his gaze settled on a small trail disappearing between the trees. Without a word, he dismounted and continued on foot. Back at the cabin, Evelyn stood frozen beside the doorway. The strange sensation kept building. Her heartbeat quickened. The silver feather glowed faintly in her hand. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked softly. She turned toward the sound. Nothing moved. Yet she could not shake the feeling that someone was approaching. Minutes passed. Then she saw him. A tall figure emerged from the mist beyond the clearing. Dark coat, dark hair, calm, measured steps. The moment Evelyn looked into his eyes, the world seemed to fall silent. She had never seen him before. Yet something deep inside her recognized him instantly. Not his face, not his name. Him. Lucian stopped several yards away. For a long moment neither spoke. Neither moved. The connection that had guided him across mountains and forests settled into place with quiet certainty. Every dream, every memory, every unexplained feeling suddenly made sense. She was real. Evelyn swallowed nervously. There was nothing threatening about the stranger before her, Yet his presence carried a quiet strength unlike anything she had ever experienced. He looked at her as though he had searched for years and finally found what was missing. The expression in his eyes held relief, wonder, and something even deeper. Finally, Lucian spoke. His voice was low and steady. I know this will sound impossible. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the feather. Then why does it feel like I already know what you are going to say? For the first time since awakening, the Alpha King smiled. And in that moment, both of them realized that destiny had arrived far sooner than either had expected. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The forest remained perfectly still around them, as though even the wind had paused to listen. Evelyn could not explain why the stranger felt familiar. Every sensible part of her mind insisted they had never met, yet another part of her was absolutely certain that was not true. Lucian seemed to share the same confusion. His silver eyes studied her carefully, not with suspicion, but with recognition. It was the look of someone remembering a song they had not heard in years. Finally, Evelyn found her voice. Who are you? The question sounded smaller than she intended. The stranger exhaled slowly. My name is Lucian Blackwood. The moment he spoke those words, Evelyn felt her breath catch. Everyone knew that name. Stories about the Alpha King traveled across every territory. Children heard them beside fireplaces. Merchants shared them on long roads. Elders spoke of him with equal parts admiration and respect. Yet the man standing before her felt nothing like the distant legend she had imagined. He looked tired, relieved, almost human in a way she had never expected. The Alpha King, she whispered. Lucian gave a slight nod. I know how unbelievable this must seem. Evelyn stared at him. Of all the possibilities she had considered over the last few days, this was not one of them. Why are you here? She asked. Lucian glanced toward the silver feather still resting in her hand. His expression softened. Because I have been looking for you. The words should have sounded absurd. Instead, they felt strangely natural. Before Evelyn could respond, a distant voice echoed through the trees. Riders. Lucian turned immediately toward the sound. Moments later, several members of his search party emerged from the forest. They stopped the instant they saw Evelyn. Surprise flashed across every face. One older scout looked from her to Lucian and then back again. Your Majesty, he said carefully, we found records in the nearest village. Lucian did not take his eyes off Evelyn. And the scout hesitated. The descriptions match. Silence followed. Evelyn frowned. Descriptions of what? The older scout exchanged an uncertain glance with the others. Lucian finally answered. A bloodline that was believed to have vanished centuries ago. Evelyn felt a chill despite the morning sun. You are speaking as though I am part of some story. Lucian's gaze remained steady. I believe you are. Before she could object, the silver feather suddenly grew warm in her hand. Bright silver light shimmered across its surface. Every person present froze. The feather slowly lifted into the air as though carried by an invisible current. Evelyn stared in disbelief. The feather drifted forward and stopped directly between her and Lucian. Then, just as suddenly, a series of faint images flashed within the silver glow. A moonlit lake, ancient stone ruins, two figures standing together beneath a sky filled with stars. The vision lasted only a heartbeat before disappearing completely. Yet it was enough. Evelyn recognized the place instantly despite never seeing it before. Lucian did too. The shock in his eyes confirmed it. Neither of them understood how. Neither could explain why. But both realized the same thing at exactly the same moment. Whatever connected them had begun long before they met in the forest. Evelyn could not stop thinking about the vision. Even hours later, as she rode beside Lucian's party through winding mountain trails, the image remained vivid in her mind. The moonlit lake, the ancient stones, the feeling that she had stood there before. Every time she tried to explain it logically, the memory slipped beyond reach like mist between her fingers. The journey toward Blackwood Kingdom continued beneath clear autumn skies. Golden leaves drifted from towering trees, while distant mountains shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The royal scouts maintained a respectful distance, but Evelyn often caught them glancing her way. Some looked curious, others looked amazed. None seemed to understand why the Alpha King himself had crossed half the continent searching for an unknown Omega. Truthfully, neither did she. Lucian rode beside her in thoughtful silence. Several times she noticed him studying the horizon with the same distant expression he had worn since the vision appeared. Finally, As the sun began lowering behind the mountains, Evelyn gathered enough courage to ask the question that had haunted her all day. What did you see? Lucian turned toward her. The same thing you saw. How can you know that? A faint smile touched his face. Because I recognized it. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. Have you been there before? Lucian hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his features. Not in waking life. The answer only deepened the mystery. Before she could ask another question, one of the scouts approached at a gallop carrying a sealed letter. He handed it directly to Lucian. The Alpha King opened it and read silently. His expression darkened. Not with anger. With concern. What is it? Evelyn asked. Lucian folded the letter carefully. The council found another record. The scout lowered his gaze respectfully. The historians confirmed the location from the vision, Your Majesty. Evelyn felt a chill. A real place. Yes. Lucian nodded. A place called Moonfall Sanctuary. The name sent an unexpected wave of emotion through her. She had never heard it before, yet it sounded familiar. Almost comforting. Lucian seemed to notice her reaction. According to the records, it disappeared hundreds of years ago. Evelyn blinked. How can a place disappear? That is exactly what the council wants to understand. Evening settled across the mountains as they continued traveling. Stars slowly emerged overhead, bright and endless against the darkening sky. Somewhere far beyond the ridges, Blackwood Castle waited. Yet both Evelyn and Lucian found themselves thinking about somewhere else entirely. A forgotten sanctuary hidden by time. A vision neither could explain. A connection that seemed to stretch far beyond fate itself. Then, just before midnight, the silver feather resting inside Evelyn's coat began glowing again, brighter than ever before. She pulled it out in surprise. Soft silver light illuminated her hands. The entire party came to a stop. Every eye fixed on the feather. Slowly, it turned on its own and pointed toward the eastern horizon, directly away from Blackwood Kingdom, directly toward the unknown. Lucian stared at it for several long seconds. Then he looked at Evelyn. Neither needed to say a word. They both understood. Whatever answers they were searching for were no longer waiting at the castle. They were waiting somewhere beyond the mountains, at a place that should not have existed anymore. They changed direction before sunrise. No one argued with the decision. The glowing feather had become impossible to dismiss as coincidence, and the certainty in Lucian's eyes convinced even the most skeptical scout that they were following something far greater than rumor or legend. The journey east carried them beyond familiar roads and into lands rarely marked on modern maps. Ancient forests stretched across the horizon. Forgotten stone markers appeared beside overgrown paths. More than once, Evelyn noticed symbols carved into rocks that matched shapes from the vision she had seen. With every mile, the feeling inside her grew stronger. It was no longer simply hope. It was recognition. Late on the second evening, they reached the edge of a hidden valley surrounded by towering cliffs. Golden light from the setting sun spilled across the landscape below. Evelyn stepped forward and felt her breath leave her lungs. The valley from the vision lay directly before her. The moonlit lake, the ancient stones, the curved archways covered in silver vines. Every detail matched perfectly. Nobody spoke for several moments. Even the scouts seemed unwilling to break the silence. Lucian slowly dismounted beside her. His expression carried the same mixture of awe and disbelief she felt. "It is real," Evelyn whispered. Lucian nodded. "And somehow we both knew it existed." As they descended into the valley, something extraordinary happened. The silver feather rose gently from Evelyn's hand and drifted toward the center of the sanctuary. Soft light spread across the ancient stones. Vines that had appeared dormant for centuries shimmered faintly. The air itself seemed alive with memory. When they reached the lake, the feather settled upon a circular stone platform overlooking the water. The moment it touched the surface, silver light flowed across hundreds of carved symbols hidden beneath moss and time. Words appeared. Ancient. Beautiful. Waiting. One of the scholars traveling with the group stepped forward in amazement. He carefully studied the glowing script before looking up with tears in his eyes. "This is not a prophecy," he said quietly. "It is a record." Evelyn turned toward him. "A record of what?" The scholar swallowed hard. "Of two souls chosen long ago to find one another across lifetimes of separation." Silence followed. The lake reflected the first stars of evening. Lucian looked at Evelyn, and for the first time everything seemed simple. Not because every mystery had been solved, but because the answer that mattered most had already been found. The dreams, the connection, the impossible journey. None of it had been an accident. Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest as she gazed across the water. For years she had believed she was forgotten, rejected, unimportant, yet standing there beneath the rising moon, surrounded by a sanctuary lost to history, she finally understood something profound. Her worth had never been determined by the opinions of others. It had always existed, quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment to be seen. The moonlight brightened across the lake. The sanctuary seemed to awaken around them. And while the valley celebrated the reunion written into its ancient stones, neither Evelyn nor Lucian noticed the final symbol beginning to glow beneath the water's surface. Because far below the lake, hidden beneath centuries of silence, another secret had just begun to wake.